of the entire process and this results?
Well, I think the process, the field work was done pretty well. They had committees in every county, sub-county, at national level, the National Steering Committee and so forth. So the field work was done pretty well. I think no one has an issue with the level of preparedness or the quality assurance that was involved in the in the count. But I think in the data processing, even in the report that was issued, published yesterday by KEBS, by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, there's no reference at all to quality control or quality assurance at the data processing, and that is where the issue is. This is the first time that census is being carried out and the data is being transmitted immediately to a server, which is offsite in Nairobi. And from there, no one except a few people in Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has any idea what has been done to that data. Encrypted data forwarded to them, but that is it. Next you see is in 2 months, results, this is it, bang. So I think we have a serious issue with the data. They don't make sense. The numbers don't add up. Because census, you remember in 2009, they raised issues with the figures from Northeastern and said those figures had been manipulated. They argued that at the time the figures don't make sense in the sense that the birth rate figures or the growth figures in those counties do not tally with the national growth figures and so forth and so forth. And we argued that, look, this is the first time the census was being done over 5, 6, 7 days period in Northeastern Province. It used to be one night. So people had time to be, and we prepared for it. But they won't accept it, and they threatened to cancel it. It was all politics. They did, and we went to court, and it was quashed. They went all the way through appeals court. It wasn't until 2016 that the court's, family said there's nothing wrong with that data. And so the argument does not hold water that. So what we are seeing today is a similar thing. And you can see from the numbers, Northeastern, 3 counties, their census in 2009 was 2.39 million. Yesterday, the figures released are 2.47 million, an increase of 80,000. In a region which has the highest fertility or birth rates recorded, and in this report itself, of up to 6.9, the average, the mean number of children per woman between the age of 15 and 49 in that region is 7.3. You can't compare that with the national average, it's 3.4, which is the same figure for central and other regions. So you then don't understand, then how did the figures come down? And so when you look at that 80, they even played around with the figures in the sub-counties and the counties, the 3 counties. So add some here and remove some from there, but the net effect is an 80,000 increase, which does not make sense. And it defeats the argument they had last time, because when you look at those figures, then they don't add up. It's not only, by the way, even when you look at the regions, look at the census results in 2009 for Western Kenya and Central Kenya. Western Kenya was 4.3 million. Central was 4.4 million, more or less the same. Western has much higher birth rate or growth rate compared to Central in the figure that is published by the government. But today you find Western has grown by only 17% from that 4.3 to 5 million, but the same Central, which has a diminishing population in terms of the growth by the statistics of the government itself, has an increase of 25%, goes to 5.5 million. So you get the sense, and this happens in a number of counties that they have. So the figures don't add up. Clearly, in my view, these are data that have been doctored and that have not been are not based on the facts, because census is about enumeration. You must publish what was enumerated, and this is what happened in 2009. Then if you have an issue, you announce and you say, we have an issue with this, because the UN guidelines are very clear. That's why the government had to publish those census figures. But I think we also know this year, thanks to the digital technology that they used, everybody knows how much information, how much data for each area has been forwarded to Nairobi, because the people working there are all people from that area. The clerks are all from that area. Everyone knows from this village the number of people who have been counted and whose data have been sent to the server in Nairobi is X number. So I mean, we have a ripe idea of what the numbers are and what to expect. Everyone had. So when you find your figures have been, reduced substantially or reduced. For example, when the director was asked last night on one of your stations, Why did the figures of Mandera reduce by 160,000? What happened? Did they die? Did they migrate from there? Or were the previous figures of 209 false? What exactly happened? Can you explain? He didn't want to explain. He says, we'll do the analysis later. And that's not the way census is done.
Yeah. So how about to wait for that analysis before then we hear this kind of, it was doctored? Are we not jumping the gun to the extent that it could very well be that there was a manner in which all of these issues played out at the time?
Well, they ought to have published in this report. If there was an issue, they should not, they are the ones who are jumping the gun. If there was an issue, they should have validated the results, do their analysis, satisfy themselves, and only when they have satisfied themselves, publish the results. This is the guideline from UN. And this is why in 2009, it took 1 year, 12 months, to do that census, so that they looked at the data and had to go by those. But this time, it's not only done in 2 months. We have no idea what happened to the data that has been uploaded to the servers, data, whatever. But you had an instruction from the president yesterday. He's directed that every ministry must immediately start using the new figures. That's why we are concerned. So it means every ministry now has the mandate from tomorrow to start using the new figures. They're not going to wait for an analysis that may or may not even come. And from what we have seen, it may not even come.
So we're hearing from Tharaka Nithi saying if in fact there's no repeat of that exercise, they're looking to move to court. Is that something you'd consider? You're not an elected member anymore, but you're still a Kenyan. You are a voter. Would you consider to take this matter to court yet again?
Well, I think so. I think that is likely to be what will happen in the case of Mandera. I can speak for, because I come from Mandera, and I'm sure, this based on the sentiments that I have heard from the region, I don't think that there's any other alternative except go to court and quash this exercise. And again, there's a bit of a background to this. Well, you know, when you've heard all these arguments made by the president and his people from Central, the last 10 years, that the figures in Mandera are overstated, the figures from Northeastern are overstated, that people had counted trees, people had counted animals. They kept repeating this, even after the courts made a decision.
What if the courts were wrong?
Well, if the courts are wrong, then we should not have courts. If we are not going to be bound by the rule of law, by a decision of court, for heaven's sake, then even the president, there was a court ruling, and he had to abide by it. So, I mean, you cannot say that when it fits us, we will go by the court ruling, and when it doesn't fit us, we don't. The court gave a ruling twice, and you know, all the counties were enjoined, and it was a big case because the government would not let go from 2009 until 2016. And so you cannot say then the courts are wrong. If there was a court decision, I think we must respect the court decision, even if we don't like it. But they have to say so. The government has not come out up to today to say that we don't agree with the courts, and that those figures, therefore, were not right, and therefore we are adjusting. When we was asked last night and pressed, the director said, no, I'm not going to get into that. What I did was I counted people, and this is what I found. Yeah. So fine, if you counted people, let us have an audit. You know, let us have an audit. This is an IT. The IT, you can make errors. You can, play around with IT figures the way you want. Nobody's party to that data, because once the data was uploaded, it was up to a few guys in the office here to manipulate it the way they want. Let us have an audit. You remember what happened to IEBC? Yeah, so the story of the servers, yeah, those servers, I mean, the courts found that that thing is not what was counted. I mean, so let us have an audit. If there's no independent audit of this census, based on servers that have been kept by, a few people in the ministry, then I think, unfortunately, this particular census was hijacked by Office of the President.
How so? That's a serious allegation to make.
The data was being forwarded. Where was the database? Where was the server? Where was the server? So I think in my view, really, the whole thing about census is about transparency. There's nothing to hide. So it must be in the same way that the fieldwork was transparent, and it was, observers and everyone and committees and, the public had this was very clear. I think in the data processing, and that is where the servers problem is in this country, we have a history. Let's look at the data. Yeah.
And let's remind Kenyans, this is quite a serious, heavy issue as far as census because of the import in terms of resource allocation, the limitation of boundaries which is supposed to begin. So that is why it's such an emotive issue, isn't it?
Well, the theme for this year's census, if you recall, was counting for sustainable development and devolution of services. And the government is very clear that this data is required for the purpose of development, agenda of the government, and for devolution. So resource allocation is one of them. And I think it's very important also even in public service appointments. Look at the report that is being published by Public Service Commission every year, or the National Cohesion. It clearly shows that based on the ethnic distribution in public service, there's a serious, skewed allocation of jobs, so that some communities don't even get as close as half of what their percentage ought to be. So I think the figures are very important, and this is why the government must appreciate that Kenyans have to be concerned. And this is not something that you can get a few people just do it in their room and then say this is it. And they have been agitating, especially when they have been saying that you people, your figures, we don't expect you guys to have numbers. So I think it's important that the people in Kenya know that everyone here is a Kenyan, and everyone has the right. No one is a second-class citizen. We deserve the same rights that everyone else must get. So I don't think that we will play second fiddle to anyone. I think what we are saying is let us have these census figures audited independently. If that is not the case, I think then the only option for people who are aggrieved, I think, is to go to court.
Yeah. Finally, there are those who read an ulterior motive saying this is all about politics, that, perhaps being brought ahead of BBI because of what that is also just going to elicit in as far as the conversation and narrative across the country. Do you agree with that? Well,
you can't rule out. This story of BBI has been all about politics. Forget about the story of inclusion and all about peace. And I think it's all about politics. So this would play a central theme in terms of cooling down temperatures, particularly those parts of the country where people have really come out very strongly against BBI. We want our numbers. We want one man, one vote. We are not having a fair number of seats from Central. This is the president.